we were on stage, and like the second song, I see two people out of the corner of my eye come running down in between the barricade and the stage, and I'm just kind of looking, and it's somebody with their hair down over their head and a girl, and I look down and they make eye contact with me, and it's Triple H and Stephanie. So they're just standing in front of our of the stage, just rocking out and just like having a blast. They fist bump me, and they're enjoying our show.
Well, it's just Joe.
It's not bad.
I feel like if you're on the show, it's only proper that we introduce you that way. But even in the music that I write, I don't usually do lyrics. I usually do lyrics. I usually don't do vocals. But we've got you, the man, the myth, the vocal legend here. Many of you on my show may know who this gentleman is already from any of his covers he's done over on YouTube, but most specifically for our entrance theme, connoisseurs here, the man who you hear in the Big Show's theme and in Paul Wight's theme, the one and only Joe Altier. Thank you for joining us today, my friend.
I know, it's a pleasure, man. I always love talking my wrestling and my history, because it's one of those things like I'm world famous, but I'm not world famous. Like if you're not a wrestling fan, that song, and like it's weekly that song is going viral. At least the noise is going viral on some video, and everybody's always like, "Hey, did you see this video?" Like, and they're using the thing. It's like everybody knows that voice, but I could walk into a room and I could be sitting at WrestleMania ringside. No one's going to know that it was me, So it's one of those things like, yeah, everyone knows that voice, but they don't know who I am, it's just fine. But I do like, it's fun to think that I'm a part of like, wrestling history, and also a part of like, what's the word? Like just, pop culture. I think that's really what it comes down to.
I love the fact that you brought up too that you can do all of these different things, but there's like this different level of like fame, right? Because people know you, they hear you, right? They know all of that. But I think my buddy Ben Eller puts it best. He goes, because he does a lot of videos on YouTube, and he's played with like Mastodon when their guitarist dropped out for a little bit, and he's just like, I'm grateful for the success that I have. I'm grateful that people know me. I'll go to the NAMM show and it's a great hang, but I can still go to the grocery store and not get chased down. And I'm like, it's such a cool dynamic to be able to have a brand, but at the same time still be able to live, some sort of like normal life, if you will. Although as musicians and artists, normal life is a relative term, isn't it?
Yeah, it is relative, but yeah, it's pretty wild. But then when I do get into talking to people about things, and they're like, and then that gets brought up, and like, oh my God, that was you, and especially because I think a lot of people, because there's a lot of times like you said before we started talking, is that like you were familiar with my covers, but you didn't know I was in Brand New Sin, or one, I look a little bit different than I did in Brand New Sin. I mean, it's still tattooed, but I'm a little skinnier. I'm a lot healthier than I was back then. It was a different style of singing. There's times I'm doing like some kind of soft ballad or something like that, and someone chimes in like, "Oh my God, I put two and two together that you're you're also the singer of Brand New Sin," and I'm like, "Yeah, like I have the ability to like chameleon my voice into different genres. I'm lucky. Not every singer has that ability. I mean, if you need the aggressive stuff, like yesterday I was working on a metal song with a guy in Poland, and but then I got done and I sang a song by Bread, for some content, so it's fun. I'm hoping that I can do that for a long time, but I am in my 50s, and I know at some point there's going to be some kind of, you know, time and age is going to catch up with me, but
But
for
it's
now
also
I'm going to run
it,
with it.
it's also a testament though to how you're probably taking care of your voice too. Because even
Yeah.
there's a social clip on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, wherever I had seen it, and you're talking about that. You're like, hey, you may know my music here, but you definitely know my voice from Big Show. And it's just your talking voice, and then all of a sudden you throw in the effects, you drop the voice, and
You're
then you
right.
hit all
Yeah.
of them. And it's just like it's so true to form that I don't know what you're doing for your voice, but at the same time, it's like you've been able to keep that versatility for years and years and years. And for me personally, if I ever do sing, I've always tried to have my influences there. And my big three influences, without knowing it, were number one being Brand New Sin, because SPP was like, oh, I feel like
Yeah,
that's probably like the closest that my low voice could probably
right.
get.
Yeah.
And Sully Erna from Godsmack, because take this as a complete compliment. You're the only two vocalists that I've heard that sound like a freight train. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing when you have that. And then Matt Heafy is my third from Trivium, but like
Oh,
it's a very
those are
different
great.
dynamic. Yeah. But
It
like,
is, and
yeah,
there's two sides to that. I guess the answer, if there's an answer, one is that I've always treated my voice as I'm an actor, like some and some people don't understand that some musicians can get up on a stage and do certain things and they're like, man, but then they're a different person in real life and all that stuff. I'm like, dude, we're no different than an actor.
right.
Just because you saw Kevin Costner in Bull Durham isn't mean he's that guy, or Kevin Costner in Yellowstone. Everyone's playing a different role, and me with my music, I've always treated each one, just like somebody who's a voice actor. You know, you're doing different voices, you're acting, you're playing the role, and it doesn't mean that I'm not genuine. I get to pull influences from different people. If I'm singing my softer stuff, pulling my influences from people like Otis Redding, Kenny Rogers, Garth Brooks. But then if it gets heavier, I'm pulling my influences from Phil Anselmo and James Hetfield and Sully Erna as well as a vocal influence. So like it's different. But one of the things I learned years ago as I was getting older and I was watching a lot of my peers who are singers start to have struggles. And when you're younger and you're in your 20s and early 30s, you can get away with like just smoking cigarettes, drinking, not
Right.
taking care of yourself, and kind of muscle through it because the you have youth on your side. But the people who have had long careers and have been able to maintain their voice, there's difference. People can still have long careers and sound like shit.
Right.
And we don't. Everyone knows examples of that. I don't even have to bring that up anymore. But it's different to hear someone like Glenn Hughes, who's in his 70s, you know, being able to sing, you know, old Deep Purple songs that he did in the original key, or Paul Rogers, who's nearly 80, being able to do that. And there was one thing that was common amongst all of those guys that had longevity. One, they got sober at some point.
Yeah.
That was one
Yeah.
thing. Like there was a point where drugs and alcohol had to go away. And that's one thing I really started doing a number of years ago. I started scaling back, and then eventually I got sober almost 2 years ago. And it wasn't like because I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the gutter. It's just like it wasn't serving me anymore. And I'm like, man, I can't do this to my body anymore. And second of all, I work out 5, 6 days a week. I'm in the gym. I'm out running a couple days a week. I'm out walking all the time. My body is my instrument. I have to take care of that. And that's huge. So like one of it is diet and exercise, and the other part of it is staying away from substances. you know and it doesn't mean that you have to have that, but you at some point it has to be either a cutoff from those substances, or you have to have a very good balance with those, because alcohol is the worst thing for your voice. It dries you out, it dehydrates you. There's a million different things that could go sideways with alcohol, and then all the other substances and smoking and all those things. So I think that's a very long answer to the two parts of what happens with my voice. That's how I do it, or at least how I maintain.
Yeah, and
So
I think it's also true to form, because I always tell a lot of my musician friends, or even a lot of the students at my wife and I's music school, I go, listen, if you're looking to be a musician over time, number one, you got to know the ways to take care of your body. And even for younger students who are starting to get into the instrument, I'm like, you can start early, build these habits. Even if you're playing guitar, like there's different things you could do to take care of your hands and things
yeah,
like that. But with vocals and with the voice, it's a completely different thing. And a completely different level. And the thing is too, I often stress that there's a difference between being like just a full blown 100%, this is my artistic sound. I'm only going to do the thing that's in my head kind of artist. And then there's a musician whose role is to serve whatever music they have to do or whatever need they see fit. And then there's kind of the blend of both of those. And it's not to take away from the artistry of the other, but like, for example, you wouldn't have a Kurt Cobain who, and no disrespect, I love Nirvana, but like Kurt Cobain was genuinely Kurt Cobain and all that implies, right? But Kurt Cobain wasn't going to go ahead and try to sing like Guns N' Roses. He wasn't going to try and sing like
No,
Pavarotti. He was just like, this is the sound that represents me. Take it or leave it. This is what I do. But then
yeah,
you have people like us who do different gigs, different sessions, and we still have our own original music that we deliver. But at the same time, it's just like you have that additional versatility and a different tool set. So there's those three different levels. It's like the professional musician, like the work music, right? Then there's that middle ground, and then there's the whatever my art is, that's what my art is, and whatever that is, you got to kind of deal with it, right?
yeah. It is. I mean, I saw a thing the other day where Alice Cooper's like, everyone was when people were asking him, like, if it was asked in an interview, like, how have you been able to maintain your voice all those years? And he's like, I sang in like a 4 or 5 note range. I stayed right in the middle. So that, like, he goes, I was never an opera singer, but he goes, I just knew to never, he goes, I knew where to land. And that's how some people do it. I mean, I was on the road with a singer a few years ago, and he is just known for like that very high acrobatic, all this stuff, and that's his thing. And he's constantly having to hit these notes, and I'm like, bro, like you're not going to be able to do this forever, like. But and he goes, well, if I keep it trained, I'm like, let's start looking at people that sing of that nature and see if they still can sing like that.
Right.
Steve Perry, Mariah Carey, those people that have insane ranges. Um, there is a definite thing that happens as you age. There's a reason why Steve Perry didn't sing for Journey and still does it anymore. He knows he can't do that anymore. Singers like that are amazing, but there is more of a shelf life for people like that, unfortunately, than
Yeah.
ever. And I'm not saying that there's definitely outliers, but for the most part, if you're going to have a career, you got a longer career, you got to make sure don't set the bar too friggin' high for yourself. I always said that in the studio. Like, I don't want to do something in the studio. I mean, every once in a while I will, but for the most part, I don't want to be doing a bunch of shit here in the studio that I won't be able to pull off live.
Right. And that's important, the fact that you're taking that creative that you're doing and you're saying, "What am I gonna actually be able to have you hear when we go live?" And
Yes.
it's interesting too because we dive all from talking about the live and the creative and all the work that you do, and we're gonna come back to that here in a second, but I want us to dive a little bit into
Yeah.
the work that you've done in wrestling entrance themes and
Sorry, my light is about to go off. I'm making sure that it doesn't. So
No, you're cool, yeah, yeah.
just got a new thing. All right, there we go. Just wanted to make sure that was working. All right, go ahead. But
You're all
yeah,
good, yeah. I
carry
wanna
on.
I wanna dive a little bit into some of the work that you've done. For one, Paul Wight, The Big Show, The Giant,
Yeah.
however you know him, the work that you've done with him, and you started with the obviously very well known The Big Show theme that came originally it was written by Jim Johnston, right, the first one, and then I would argue, and I don't even think it's an argument, that the version that you put together and Brand New Sin put together was and still is the version that people remember about Big Show. So I'd love you to walk us through a little bit on how you guys came to work on that theme for the Big Show.
It's quite a story. So I've told it so many times that I have it down condensed. But it is funny how many people like online like, well, you didn't sing the original. I'm like, I never said I sang the original. And
Right.
they're like, well, Michael Hayes sang the original. And I'm like, yeah, all of us hardcore wrestler fans know that. But I don't think that song would have had the staying power. And I think that's what they're really going for. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of the story, but how this all came about was we were on tour with Motorhead in 2005, spring of 2005, when we were playing at the Hampton Beach Casino in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire. Um, the guys in Motorhead and the crew were like, hey, Triple H and Stephanie are going to be out tonight. Obviously their connections. So, and they live close to Hampton Beach at the time, or New Hampshire. I think they live outside of Boston, I believe. So they're like, they're going to be at the show tonight. We're like, all right, cool. But like sometimes you hear that a celebrity is going to be at a show, but uh, they don't roll in until like the last minute. They're rolling in just
Right.
before Motorhead is playing. They're not interested in seeing the opener. Um, so I didn't think much of it at that point in my career. I was like, I'm not going to you know, get my hopes up. Things could change, but we
And
got
real
on
real quick, I
stage.
just wanna let the fans know this is for when Triple H had long hair, ladies and
Oh
gentlemen.
yeah, yeah.
Just
He was still
time
very much
frame.
an active. Yeah, this is 20 years ago. Um, so we're on stage and like the second song, I see two people out of the corner of my eye come running down in between the barricade and the stage. And I'm just kind of looking and it's somebody with their hair down over their head and a girl. And I look down and they make eye contact with me and it's Triple H and Stephanie. So they're just standing in front of our of the stage, just rocking out and just like having a blast. And they fist bump me and they're enjoying our show. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. And most of the guys in my band weren't privy to wrestling. Like one guy, my one guitar player was. And him and I kept looking at each other like, this is fucking awesome. So we get done with the set. We go into the dressing room. I'm in the dressing room and there's a knock on the door. And, I open it and it's Triple H and Stephanie. I'm like, hey, blah, blah, blah. Can we come in? And we're like, yeah, absolutely come in. We just had a long conversation. They were just, praising us. They're like, you guys are fucking great. Have some beers with us and just shooting the shit. And they're like, hey, we want to present you guys to the brass. We think you guys could be um a great addition to the music world and in WWE. And we're like, well, of course, yes. Of course we want that opportunity. And this isn't just coming from, this isn't a take away from the other guys that are in the WWE. This isn't, the jobbers, the guys that are there, the stars. These are he's now the boss of the freaking company. She's the daughter of the owner. It's like, uh, these are people that are actually going to make something happen. So we ended up having a great night. They took back a bunch of stuff. They took some merchandise and, we said goodbyes. And like a week and a half later, our manager got a call from WWE headquarters and they're like, listen, we definitely want to work with the band. We just don't know in what capacity yet. So we're just going to, we wanted to reach out and say, yes, we're going to. And you'll be hearing from us at some point. Because at that point, there's always different seasons and different storylines and
Right.
different ideas of what they're doing. So, they just didn't know exactly where we were going to get plugged in. So then fast forward to the fall, it was like October, like 4 or 5 months later, we finally get a call again from our manager. We're on tour in Carolinas with Black Label Society. And our manager called and said, hey, WWE called and they've finally picked a wrestler that they want you to work with. And we're like, all right, who? And they're like, well, the Big Show. And we're like, awesome. Like, yeah, he's coming back. And we're like, well, are we writing it? What are we doing? They're like, no, and then they had Jim Johnston on the phone with us. And he's like, no, we want you. He goes, I just want you to take the existing theme song and just sludge it up, slow it
Sure.
down tune the guitars, and blah, blah, blah. And we'll see you in a week. We're like, a week? They're like, so they knew we had 2 days off in between Springfield, Massachusetts, and Toledo, Ohio. So they're like, on those 2 days off on his tour, right after Springfield, you're going to come on that Monday and come straight to Stamford, Connecticut to record the song. And we'll spend all day. And we're like, man, how are we going to rehearse this? Or like, just work on it. We have all day at the studio at WWE. So yeah, we end up rolling in WWE headquarters that Monday, which was crazy because Monday Night Raw was going to happen that night. So there was a lot going on in the studio and at headquarters that night because they were getting ready for Monday Night Raw. So in between Jim recording us and us working that out, there was like 10 people in the control room also doing shit for Monday Night Raw. They're editing it. We got to add this song. We got to do this, and a writer would call like, hey, we got to make this change. So it was pretty chaotic. But to watch Jim work, and anybody who's into wrestling knows how legendary Jim is, and the long history that he had. To watch someone of that stature work was fucking fascinating. I think that was one of the things I love, and that he was able to watch something that he had to do with Raw and then immediately turn his attention back to us and get us. He wasn't at any moment felt like he was like distracted or annoyed that we were there. He knew what jobs he had to do, and he was balancing it all. And I was like, this this guy's a fucking Superman.
Yeah.
But that's how it came about, and that's how we ended up at WWE headquarters. And again, it's a long story, and there's a lot of fucking twists and turns. But eventually, we recorded that in the fall, but it didn't make its debut because they weren't sure what Big Show was going to do. At that time, he was in WWE, but then they had just at that time acquired the rights to oh man, why am I forgetting?
To
Um,
WCW and
du-
yeah, yeah.
no, they
Oh,
bought. Why am I thinking where the Dudley Boys came from and all the
ECW.
ECW? They had
Yeah.
just bought ECW. That's what it was. And I got all these W's in my head. I'm like, which one was it? They bought ECW, and what they were doing, they're like, oh, we're gonna move Big Show over to ECW, and we're gonna debut it when we do our first ECW pay per view, which would be the following May or June of '06 is when the theme song finally made its debut because then they knew what they were going to do, and then they changed his character. They wanted to make. I think at that time he came out as a heel, so they wanted that music to kind of coincide with that. And then the rest is history, really.
It's such a crazy story too because it starts literally from you guys at a concert, right? Playing with Motorhead who writes Triple H's theme. And it's like, "Oh, he's
Yeah,
just going to be there." And then all of a sudden like you there's always the opportunity that WWE calls and says, "Hey, we're going to work with you," and nothing ever comes, right? And we know as musicians that that can happen. But then the other side is when it actually does and you're like, "Oh, wow, what's going to happen?" And then you're making all these snap decisions in a week, right? And even probably in the recording room, you guys are making those compositional decisions. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, not to date either of us, but now this computer behind me, if you can see it somewhere, is the computer I do all of my entrance themes on. I'm plugging
yeah.
DI into it. I've got sequence drums or I'm getting tracks from people, wherever the case. That's not the case back when you're recording there. You're talking about you're going in, you're setting up amps, you're setting up all this different stuff. So it's not even that you just have like, okay, a day to write the music or a week to write the music. You're talking setup, you're talking production. And for those who don't know, Jim would spend like 20 hours in his studio at WWE HQ. Like you're not talking about somebody who's clocking in an 8-hour day. And a lot of the people who work over at WWE are clocking that kind of time frame
Oh,
because
it
it's
was it was crazy
24/7.
to be at headquarters, and we've been back to headquarters a few times for a couple of different things. One of them being an acoustic version of the song that we did up there, which was a few months later. No, a year later. A year later, we went back and did that. But just to see, at least at that time, I mean, I haven't been around the organization, but man, what a freaking machine it was. I mean, it was like, man, there was so many moving parts and so many people involved and so many different things. So it was pretty frigging cool to watch. I'm that type of person. Like, I'm not just happy to be here. I want to watch how shit is getting done. And their studio there was like, what equipment do we need? They're like, you don't need anything. We have everything. I mean, they literally, you walked in this other room and Jim's like, well, what guitar do you want? What amp do you want? What drums do you want? Whatever you needed was there. You know, my guys, I think, did use their guitars just because that's their guitars, but everything else was already provided by that, you know. And once they got the music down, then he kicked everybody out. He said, you guys can go to dinner. Now I want you. And that was pointing at me. And then we spent that was a fun that wasn't it wasn't hard. It was a lot of fun. I freaking learned a lot. But when you work with someone, any producer, not just Jim, like if you're working with any music producer that's on another level and you get a chance to work with them and you listen, and, you know, and I learned so much in a few hours time, because it probably took 2-3 hours to record those vocals. But you're also there's WWE brass on the other side of the fucking window, and I'm sitting here cutting, this theme song is gonna be heard by literally millions, if not billions of people. And, yeah, the pressure was on a little bit.
But and how collaborative was it working with Jim? Because it sounds like
Awesome.
obviously you had the music for the reference and he's like, "Hey, cut a heavier version of this."
Yeah.
But at the same time, it has its own character. Otherwise, it wouldn't have its staying power. We'd be talking about the first version, right?
Well,
But
that's I think that was one of the biggest things. One was like there wasn't a second verse to that song. And they were like, all right, we got to get a second verse. I was trying desperately to write some lyrics because I'm like, fuck, I want a writing credit on this, because if I get a writing credit on this, man, this thing could buy me a house at some point, the amount of
Yeah.
streams that I get.
It's also
Unfortunately, I
smart
didn't
thinking
because,
too, right? Yeah,
right.
totally.
But Jim's like, no, 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 I'll have lyrics for it. He knows. I'm like, well, I tried. I'm like, you understand what I'm trying? He goes, oh, absolutely. But he goes, I got some other stuff. So, but I think really when it came down to the collaborative part of it, I had cut pretty much the entire song. But as any wrestling entrance theme goes, you got to grab someone within the first half a second, 2 seconds. Literally, it sounds 2 seconds is a long time for a wrestling theme song. You you hear the glass smash, and there comes Stone Cold. You hear you, you hear a certain noise, or you hear the funeral bell, the Undertaker's coming out. So that part has to be so iconic. And I remember he goes, all right, let's just cut this, because I wasn't having problems with the beginning. He's like, let's move forward and let's come back and we'll end with the beginning. And if anyone remembers that original theme song, it was very bluesy. It's kind
Yeah.
of like a big blues singer doing that well. And I kept trying to do it like that. And Jim's like, no, 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 no. He was letting me try it. And he's like, you know what? It doesn't work with the rest of the song. He's like, fucking throw that out the window. Stop trying to do that. And he goes, what would you do? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, what do you think? And I just kept toying with it. And I'm like, well, I just went, where just that big note. And he's like, he saw everybody in the control room was like, they all went like that. So it's like, there you go. That's what it is. So, I didn't try to blues it up. I just did that friggin' where. That was it. One note that's held for like, what, maybe a second, and no music happens. You hear that, and we know the big show's coming in.
By the way, real quick, I just gotta cut you off because only you could hit perfectly that A that's in the AEW one, and then or only you could hit the exact notes from the AEW one and the exact note from the
Yeah.
WWE one, right?
Well,
That C
I
and
get
that D.
confused because I've done them two different times, and so like depending on what theme song I'm thinking of, because
Right.
if you want to jump ahead, when that one came to me, that was a crazy story too. But like,
And the one we're talking about real quick for those who are familiar with that one or unfamiliar is all of a sudden Big Show makes the big jump over to AEW, now going
yeah,
by Paul Wight, and Mikey Rukus and you collaborate on that new theme. So yeah, sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to
no,
give a
no,
little
it's fine.
context
But
for
like,
that.
we went over to that, and Mikey had sent me that, and that's a crazy story. But I'll jump ahead, and we can digress if we have to. But like, when we went back, when he sent me that track, didn't have well in it. It wasn't, he had already written the lyrics and the melody lines and everything, and I just kind of had to mimic it. And he's like, man, if you feel something, you feel something. And in my head, I'm like, well, there has to be some kind of bridge. There has to be something that connects the two,
Yeah.
you know? Like, that theme song and him, I honestly think it's his theme song is sometimes more iconic than the actual wrestler. Again, in pop culture now, people will hear that theme song, but they're going to think the theme song or the song, not even think of Paul. And I'm not saying because of me, but it's just the way it is.
That's
So I'm
how
like,
iconic it is. Yeah, that's not a
how do
bad
I
thing. Yeah.
bridge, how do I bridge the two? And I literally had, when Mikey had gotten a hold of me, he's like, I'm sending this over. I'm like, well, when do you need it done? He's like, today. This is a
Yep.
Monday.
Yep.
And he goes, we're going to have this out Wednesday or Thursday. We don't know which day it was, because this is during the pandemic. So, things are a little weird. He goes, I don't know what night we're going to use this. But he goes, we got to have it done today. Can you get it done today? I'm like, yeah, uh, let me go. He's like, all right. And I sat down in here. And at the time I still was drinking. I just went back there and I just took a big slug of whiskey. I poured myself a shot of, some high end whiskey, did a shot, and I came over to the mic and did that. And I just heard that, da, 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 and there was a stop. And I'm like, there's my opportunity to go, where, and do do the well. And then it's been a long, long road and it's just getting started. Because before that didn't exist, you know. So
That's
I
so
threw that in there.
surprising, though, and the thing is, Mikey's a fan.
It might have been
Yeah.
a yeah or something like that. I can't 100%, but it did not say well. And I'm like, it has to have it there. And when I sent it over, he's like, oh, dude, this is gold. Cause now we bridge it, you know, cause now when that theme song hits and you're like, I don't know exactly what it is, but then you hear that and the wrestling fans are gonna be like, oh,
Right, and I'll say, I haven't worked with Jim. I've worked with Mikey a couple times, and I've been grateful when they've used music that I've written for wrestlers and they've been brought in. Mikey pulled me to do one song for the Sting EP, which is just like, what? Little Me is just like, what are we doing? Little Me Big
yeah,
Me feels like Little Me at that point. But the thing that I have the tie through with both of them is they trust you to trust yourself and trust your instincts. Like you said with Jim, it's like, what would you do for that? Well, and I'm not going to
yeah,
try doing it again.
right.
But then like with the Paul Wight theme, Mikey sends that to you and he's like, "Hey, I've got this, but do what you feel." And also, by the way, for anyone thinking that today turnaround time is crazy, it's not. Ask Mikey, ask you, ask me. There's been plenty of things that we've been like, "Hey, this needed to be done like an hour ago." That kind of stuff, right? And it's just when it comes to writing music too, sometimes it's like that's when you get real creative too, because it's like you know what you should do, you know what you want to do, and you know exactly what you're not gonna do. But at the same time, I can understand how there's that collaborative thing there, and it's like Mikey knows, hey, this is the guy that did that. I'm sorry, I'm still just shocked that it didn't come through. And he's like, you got to do the well, man. You got to do
Yeah.
the well. But it's
No,
funny.
I
He,
don't remember that being there originally. It might
yeah,
have been something else. I mean, I'm sure on my hard drive somewhere I have it, you know, and I haven't listened to it, but like that happened so fast. I just did 3 vocal comps. I'm like, "How many you want?" He's like, Can you give me at least 2 vocal comps?" I'm like, yeah, no problem." So I did 2 or I think I did 3, and half hour later, I sent it over to him, and he's like, "Shit, you're done already?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Fuck."
yep.
He goes, "Awesome." He goes, "No, no, this is great." And then that evening, I was streaming, and at that time, I was streaming on Twitch. And, you know, I didn't have any gigs going on, so I was streaming almost every day. So I'm streaming on Twitch, and then I get an email, and he had sent me like a comp of like what was going to sound like. I'm like, holy shit! I go, this sounds so cool. And then the next day, he sent me the final version. He goes, it's going off on Wednesday.
Oh my God.
So you know, Monday to Wednesday, and you know, it was quick. But I mean, I half hour, 40 minutes tops. I think I did that in. I think I spent more time just sitting there, kind of listening to it. And then me, when it comes to vocals, anybody who once you start getting to the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 12th, any takes that just start going down the line, you either got to step away from it completely or you got to scrap it because my opinion, all my best vocals and anybody who's a vocalist will tell you, oh, they got that on the first or second take. You know,
Right.
yeah, you might go back and punch things in, but the gut of it and the majority of it is done in that initial inception. Because after you get any musician will tell you when you record, doesn't necessarily be a singer, any of them, once you get past a couple takes, then you start getting into your fucking head. And
Yeah,
it's really hard
definitely.
not to because then you're like, well, we really need you to get that one little part. And then you're like, then it fucks everything up. And then everything just starts, it's like a house of cards. You're like, ah, you fall apart. So,
Well, you
you
start
know,
analyzing it at that point too, right? And especially if you know like your theory and things like that, you're like, "Oh, maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll try this." And you
yeah,
try to get a little and you try to get a little over creative, right? And you're just like,
yeah,
"Oh, well, I'll do this and I'll do this." When in reality, you hear it, you trust your ear and you just go for it. Yeah.
right, right. So sometimes that's why I'm like, man, this like we got that, and somebody be like, you sure? I'm like, yeah, we'll do a punch in here and there, but that's the emotion. I mean, if we want to sound robotic, we can absolutely do that, you know. But in that instance, no. So, but yeah, that was fun too. That was a lot of fun.
I'm going to give Mikey a hard time about that too. I'm going to be like, "Listen, wait a minute. How is that not in it?" And I
Yeah,
know he's
ask him, and I apologize if it happened to be in there, but I don't recall. And Mikey, if it was in some way, shape, or form, then I apologize, but I don't think it was, or I don't think it existed like that. You
right.
know?
There was something representative maybe, but it wasn't just
Maybe,
a
maybe,
yeah.
but again, that was shit, 5 years ago almost, over 5 it was that 2020?
Something
2021?
let me look. Let
2020
me see.
I I don't remember. I would pull up my computer, but my Mac Studios did an update a little while ago, and it's just doing this really
Yeah,
weird blinking thing, so there's a
2021.
it
2021 is
was
when it
20
was.
okay, it was 2021. I couldn't remember, I'm like, "I don't feel that it was in 2020 because nothing was happening in 2020." So, yeah, it was the summer of 2021 when that happened.
That's not how the song goes. It goes Summer of '69. But
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so you've done Paul White's theme, you've done Big Show's theme. Have you ever gotten to just like up with him and be like, "Hey man, how's this?"
Yeah, we
In both
we got
sides.
to meet Paul a handful of times, and one of them was shortly after we recorded that. It's like a week or 2 after. We had happened to be in Wisconsin, and we're on our way, I think, to Indianapolis to play on that same Black Label tour. All this stuff happening in freaking literally a couple weeks' time. The phone call, the recording, and then WWE is like, "Well, can you make it to?" I think it was Indianapolis, somewhere in the Midwest, and they're like, "Hey, we know you have a day off. Do you guys come to Raw? Come meet everybody. Come meet Vince. Come backstage. Come the whole nine." So we drove overnight, I think, from like Madison and or somewhere up there in Wisconsin, and we drove down. It might have been Milwaukee, who knows? And we drove, and we got to Indianapolis early in the morning, and we literally pulled right into the arena. And as soon as we got out, the brass was there, and like, hey, we're gonna show you around. What do you guys want to do? And our tour guide for the day was Triple H. I believe
Wow,
he was hurt. I
okay.
believe he was hurt at the time. I don't know. I think he was injured at the time. He was not wrestling that night, but he was there. So, he just took us around. You guys want to see everything? Took us out, show us they're getting the ring up, Triton, the big screen is up. They're doing all this stuff. Get to go in the ring and jump on the ropes and realize how fucking hard the ropes are, how nothing's really as cushioned as it looks. Then we went to catering and we got to meet Vince. Vince was incredibly nice to us and grateful for what we had did. And backstage at WWE is not just seeing the wrestlers that are wrestling now, but all the people that work behind the scenes. Sergeant Slaughter was still working behind the scenes at the time, and
Okay, yeah.
Steamboat, Ricky Steamboat was behind the scenes, and there was all these old school wrestlers that were still in the biz and on some level. So like me being backstage was just like, this is awesome. And then they're like, well, Paul's going to be here eventually. When you get here, we're going to do some photos with you guys. So he arrived and we went out and I got some pictures, but this is like, it was like flip phone photos that I have. They're horrible. I'm sure WWE's got them, but we got to meet him and hang out. Um, and then we got to watch the whole show. We got to sit down in some writing sessions and watch how I don't remember who Shawn Michaels was wrestling that night, but we got to sit in one of the rooms and watch Shawn Michaels plan out the match. It was fucking awesome to watch that, right?
So cool. And most people will go back and they'll see who they worked with, but very few people get to see like that whole inner working behind it also.
Yeah. And then the writers came in and like, hey, we're going to do this. Can you guys finish it up? We need this to be 7 minutes, like, because the time, like, this is happening in real time. So everything's getting moved depending on all that stuff. So to watch that was cool. And then the next time we got to see Paul was the following year when ECW, because ECW and SmackDown would record on the same night. They would just,
Right, they do
SmackDown
one before
recorded
the
on
other, yeah.
Tuesdays. So they would do SmackDown, then change all the colors and they would change the ring look and all that stuff. So they're like, come up to Albany. Tonight's going to be, the first time, other than the pay per view, this is going to be the first time that, you know, Big Show comes out to his theme song, We Want You There. So we went up to Albany, we're from Syracuse. So drove up to Albany a couple hours. We sat right behind the announcers all night. We were behind, Jim Ross and Lawler and like literally right behind them. So we got to sit there all night. And when Big Show came out that night, they're like, hey, the guys are here, they're right behind us. The cameras are panning to us and all that sound. Paul came out. We end up having lunch with Paul that day at catering. And, he pointed us out. So it was cool. Those are the 2 times we got to hang out with him, and there was one time he came through Syracuse, and I got to see him briefly and stuff. So, but yeah, what a wild time, man, to be able to see all that. The Albany one stuck out to me because that was the time. Undertaker is my favorite wrestler of all time, and he walked into catering, and I'm sitting there with Paul. I'm just like, and Paul's like, "What?" I'm like, "This Undertaker's here." He's like, "Yeah, Mark." I'm like, "Yeah, dude." I'm like, I don't get starstruck, but that's my favorite wrestler of all time. He's like, "You want to meet him?" I'm like, I get clammed up.
Yep.
So he took me over, and we met Mark for a few minutes, and was just like, I don't even know if I said words, you know.
You just, "Yes. Yes, sir.
Oh,
Yes, sir, Mr.
yeah,
Mark. I
I'm
mean,
doing this.
Undertaker, yes."
Yeah, doing this thing. So it was just cool. And then obviously for a long time I had a phone number, and anytime I wanted to go to a show, they'd hook me up. But I don't know if that phone number still works anymore. I don't think there's a lot has changed in 20 years. So
It's so cool though, and it's one of those things that shows that the relationship of that theme of you, of Big Show, like, that continues over the years, it's like,
yeah,
I'm grateful to say that the themes that I've worked on for wrestlers, like, there's that community, there's that relationship, and it's like, you don't realize it kinda getting into this and doing this, but then when you are a musician and you have this skill and you're painting that sonic palette of a wrestler's story, it's just like there's a gratefulness on both sides, I think, and I think Kevin said this with It Lives, It Breathes. He worked on Will Ospreay's theme before I was with It Lives, It Breathes, and he's just like, "Hey, it's crazy because I wrote this song for this guy when he's on the Indies. Now he's in AEW, and it's just like then all of a sudden they're on this Shiprock thing together, and they're singing separate ways. And Will Ospreay's like, "Hey, here's this," and it's like you grow these friendships, but you also never know where your music's gonna go.
yeah.
You
I
don't
mean,
know where the track is gonna go. It could stay in the bingo halls, which is great. It's awesome. It's still doing the job that it's supposed to
yeah,
do, but it could grow into so much more. And then, that just relationship with your wrestler grows. And it's like it's so cool to see.
yeah. I mean, even last week there was a viral TikTok of there's this guy he's a DJ, and he goes to different cities around the country, and I think he's like, I don't know if he's an EDM DJ or something in that. He's a club DJ. And I don't know if he's super huge, but he's well known. He travels and tours. But he dropped in the middle of a song, he dropped the Big Show's theme song. And the video was like, I didn't expect this to happen. And it's like the whole crowd just, "Wah," and the whole fucking club is just bumping and singing the words. And then, like, every time something like this happens, someone's tagging me. Like, hey, and then I'll chime in, like, hey, that's me singing. There's a lot of times people are like, you're full of shit. You didn't fucking sing the song. And like, the internet is just so brutal. I'm like, I don't care I know my truth. I mean, a simple Google search would prove that I'm the guy, but whatever. If you believe something else, or you think I'm just trying internet clout, then whatever. I don't give
Well,
a shit. I
again, though, you know who they think it is. They're just like, Paul did that.
Yeah,
Big
Paul
Show
did
did
it.
that. And
Or
you're just like,
Paul hates the theme song that you did. And I'm like, well, in this interview, I'm like, no, I'm like, think you got taken out of context and stuff. I'm like, you're looking at interviews, but so I chimed in on that, and then the DJ wrote me, and he's like, "Holy shit!" He goes, "Man, you're a legend. You're an OG." And he's like, "Actually, I'm going to be up in the Northeast at some point." I'm like, "Well, let's figure it out and let's do that in one of your
yeah,
middle shows. I'll come out and start singing it while you drop it." He's like, "Dude, that'll be so epic." I'm like, so at some point that's going to happen. And I'm just like, oh, dude, that's going to be so much fucking fun.
love
You
that
know?
too. Oh my gosh. And again, you never know where it's gonna take you.
Nope.
And,
You
you
never
know,
know.
And now let's do a brief kind of talk about some of the covers you do. I know we're kind of, I want to respect your time as much as possible, but I'd be remiss to be able to not talk about Whiskey Lullaby, or let's actually just talk about what we were talking about off pod the other day, which was that Margaritaville cover, man. Your
Yeah.
boy went to high school in Key West. I went from 8th grade to 12th grade. That's not
I
high school,
can't
but it's that
believe you
thing.
lived there. What a fucking wild experience that must
Everyone
have
says
been.
that. Everyone's just like, "How was it living in Key West?" And I'm like, I feel like as a teenager, it was very different because,
Oh yeah.
when you go down as a grown-up and when you go down as a grown-up that doesn't have kids, it's a different experience. When you go down with kids, it's an experience. But when you grow up there as a kid, you're just like, "There's a 2 by 4 Mile Island, and to go to a mall is a 5-hour drive, and to go to a concert that you actually want to see at that age
You gotta
is
go
a"
to Miami. Yeah,
dude,
you're
it's
driving. Or
crazy.
to a Walmart, like It's people don't realize it's paradise. I have a friend that still lives there, and he's just like, "I love it down here," but he goes, "Man, you can't. You have there's no Home Depot,
No,
there's
not
no
at all.
Walmart. Like none of that shit exists in any of the keys. So it's a
There's an
very wild
Acme, and you
thing.
better hope that it's got everything you need.
Yeah, you better hope that it does. But yeah, the covers have always been like. eh, eh, Long story short is when I was in Brand New Sin, when I would come home from tour, and then we were home for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, couple months. Everyone had to go get a job. We weren't making enough money in that band. If anything, we were just fucking throwing. We were losing money. We come home sometimes after 5 weeks with zero fucking dollars, and probably $10,000 in debt. So all of us had to come home and make enough money to pay our bills, or make enough money so that we could afford to go back out on the road again. So, I started coming home like, I don't want to go work a fucking job. I've been playing rock star for 2 months. I don't want to do this, and I've always had the ability to just sit down and play at the piano and play cover upon cover upon cover. And I'm just looking at the other guys here in town. I'm like, man, there's guys in this town playing 3, 4 nights a week. I can do that.
Yeah,
No offense to them. I'm as just as good, if not better than these guys. So I started using my clout and Brand New Sin to get me in the door, but then I became a novelty because everyone's like, oh my God, the singer from Brand New Sin is in this bar on the corner singing Elton John songs and Billy Joel. And that eventually became my identity even after I left Brand New Sin. And I've been a full-time musician doing that ever since, those days. So I was making more money doing that than I was in the band. And when I left the band, then I just dove on the net and the full time. So then eventually social media came around and I started posting up some covers and stuff like that. And then the pandemic came around. So then social media became even more important and streaming became more important. And I'd always had fun like reworking songs. Like someone's like, hey man, can you play War Pigs? And I'd find out a version of how to play War Pigs on the
yeah.
piano. But really when things took off is one night I was on a Twitch stream and I was like playing someone wanted to hear Brown Eyed Girl. I'm like, oh God, I don't want to fucking play a song. It's so overplayed and I don't want to play it again. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna try playing it in a minor key. What happens when I put it in a minor key? So instead of G, it was in G minor. So
Right.
I started doing that and slow it down and singing a little bit. The melody's a little bit different to hit the notes. And I'm like, wow, I'm onto something here. And at that time, TikTok started taking off because my TikTok that really blew things up for me was me saying, hey, have you ever wondered what the
Of
voice of,
course. Yeah, yeah.
that was the one that blew up that got me the WWE. That was like a 500,000. But the one that really broke the gates open was my version of Brown Eyed Girl in a minor key. And that went viral, like 1 million views in one day. And then I'm like, all right, I think I'm onto something. And that was like the floodgates had opened from there. Like, let's rework this. What if it was a country song? What if we just turned it into a ballad? What if we turned it into a minor key? What if we did like the Margaritaville one that I just did was like, I was like, all right, I'm gonna sit here with my programs and just do like a drum loop and add some strings and like let's do a dark cinematic version of it. And now
Yeah.
I'm doing those things because those are none of them gone viral, but they're cool. And at some point they're gonna do that. It just offers us things. So really over the past 5 years, I really just have kind of dove into like reimagining songs. And sometimes they hit with people, sometimes they piss people off, but I'm like, I don't really care. Because some people are so protective.
Sure,
They're
definitely.
like, fuck, so and so will be rolling over in their grave, or somebody be so pissed. And then sometimes I'm like, I send them a screenshot in the comment of like that artist fucking being like, this is awesome. And like, I don't give a fuck what you say,
Right.
and honestly, the gatekeeping that happens amongst fans and fandom because of the internet it's ridiculous. Cause I know as an artist, if someone took one of my original songs in Brand New Sin or as a Just Joe or anything like that and did something cool with it, I'd be like, dude, that's fucking awesome.
Of course. Yeah. And,
I don't think any artist out there is going to be pissed off or like, oh my God, I can't believe you ruined my work.
it's
It's like,
true.
whatever, man.
As
Get over
artists,
yourself.
as artists, I think we always appreciate that someone seeing your work and someone doing something with it, whether it's exact or whether it's their own rendition of it. But something with Margaritaville too is, I was showing my wife your version of it, and she's just like, I would not have like, because she knows the song in its current form. She's just like, it's
Yeah.
funny though, like you don't think about it. And my wife's a musician too. She's got her master's in piano performance, better musician than I ever feel I ever am, right? But like
Right.
she hears it and she's just like, you would never think that from the lyrics, but I always bring up bands like Less Than Jake, who are like ska bands, are doing everything upbeat. She's like, yeah, but they do songs in minor too. You talk about a song like Margaritaville, and she's like, you would never think that it's that dark of a song until you read the lyrics, like you said. And she's like, I wonder why he wrote it like that. I'm like, look, there's two different things. One is what is your skill palette? No, three things. Second is what can you actually do as a musician, right? And what's going to sell. And third is like, is there some juxtaposition of like, let's make it sound real happy, but at the same time, it's really this
Right.
crushing song, you
Well,
know?
when it comes to radio, at least back then, upbeat always sold quicker. You
Right.
you wanted some people dance to, snap to. Not to say that ballads couldn't be big, but like if you go back and listen to a lot of those songs in the '60s, even the early days of rock and roll, some of those are really dark songs. Like oh where can my baby be? It's a
Yeah.
fucking car crash. The girl died in his goddamn arms,
Right.
and they're like, you got this song that's going like this, and it's like, but you got in a car crash and your girlfriend died in your arms on a rainy night, and now you're just screaming for her, going, "Where is she?" Like, oh, he's heartbroken, but everyone's like, hey, hey, and they're dancing to it. And it's like, wait a minute. Don't you listen to these fucking lyrics? And that happens a lot. Or sometimes the lyrics might have been meant for an upbeat thing, but they're open for interpretation to be looked at a different way. Like in Brown Eyed Girl, that is an absolutely upbeat song about somebody who, singing about it. But when you put it in a different key, it almost makes it sound like, man, did she die? Is he pining for her?
Yeah.
Did she break up with him? Did she die? Like you can do all these things, like even the song "You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine," that everyone knows that part. "You make me happy when the skies are gray," but when you look at the verses, those verses are dark as fuck,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're a little disturbing. 'Cause anyone is looking at, just go look up the lyrics. We're not gonna take the time to do that here, but go look up those lyrics.
I had an assignment for one of my comp students years ago, and I actually took that song and I was just like, take it and put it in minor, but use the harmonic minor or like the classical minor, right? Where you hit that major five. And I'm just like, if you do that, it sounds like a stalker song.
Yeah.
Like, if
No,
you do that, it
absolutely,
can
and
change the context
that's what I've
completely.
done with all these songs, and it's fun, and every week I'm even at my gigs, I'm, like, playing songs, and I'm like, "Oh," and I gotta write that down, I'll say, "Hey, SIRI," I don't wanna say it or she'll
Right.
my phone will go out, you know, um, "Remind me to do this," and it's fun, it pushes my creativity, but it also pushes my creativity not to do stuff like that, but it pushes me into different realms so that when I start writing my own music, which I'm getting ready to record another solo record, which I haven't done in a number of years. I've been concentrating on other things, but I really got creative over the past year. It's like I took all those skills that I've had in the past 5 years and all these new perspectives on music, and then that jumps over into your creativity, into your own stuff. So it's always a journey, and as a musician, I'm tell everybody, I go, man, that's why, like, man, I wish Metallica sounded like fucking Kill 'Em All, like they suck after after Cliff died and blah blah blah, and they always say that. I'm just like, man, let's go back 30 years. Are you dating the same person that you were 30 years ago? No. Are you working the same job that you worked fucking 30 years? Go, how much do you weigh? Do you wear the same fucking clothes? Let's talk about all the things that are different in your fucking life.
Right.
I couldn't imagine being with that girl. That fucking girl sucked, and blah blah blah. And it's like, yeah, like, but do you want to, like, as a musician, you're always wanting to push the boundaries of your talent, and maybe you have more talent than just going. Metallica, those guys had more talent than just being a thrash band. They had the ability to, like, hey, we can be a southern rock band. And they had all those influences. And honestly, if they didn't make the Black record, they would have never been any bigger than Megadeth, Slayer. They all would have been stayed in that same thing.
It's
But
true.
because Metallica made the Black record and pushed metal into the fucking mainstream, really, Metal never was mainstream until Metallica put that out. And once they did, it lifted everything up. And then everyone got Megadeth, Slayer, all those other bands got it. So anybody is like, well, they sucked after Cliff died. And so I'm like, just shut the fuck up. Because
Right.
Metallica is like literally not just the biggest metal band of all time, they're one of the biggest bands,
Yeah.
period, of
And to
all
think
time.
about that too, if James Hetfield turns around and he tells the story all the time, he's like, "Man, I wrote Nothing Else Matters, and I thought I was gonna show it to Lars, and he was gonna be like, ah, man, that's not what we do." And Lars is like, "Dude, that's dope. Let's keep
Yeah.
going with it." Like, it
So
also takes another person who's open-minded on that to be like, "Hey,
yeah,
let's rock and roll."
it
I
is, and
know
I mean, and that's what it is. I think it goes back to where we were initially talking is these covers. It's just like I just like doing different things, and it's a way to really one, I get the clicks and the views and all that stuff, and that's not so much important, but it's really built my brand and my ability, and like up on my whiteboard because now that I'm doing, like more session work here at home, I got to the point where I'm like I don't want to go out and play piano, man, and don't stop believing a million times anymore. Like I'm more than that. Like lean into the 30 years of experience that you have and start becoming a session musician. And now becoming a session musician is easier than ever. It's more competitive than ever because now you're competing with the entire world.
of
But you
course.
have the ability, once you build that niche, to be able to um I can do anything here. I don't have to like, oh my God, we need you for a session in Nashville. Can you get on a plane tomorrow? And then get down there and you have to be in the studio. Now, at least what I do, I mean, I got my SM7B, I got my other modeling microphone, I got a couple of different microphones depending on what I need to use, and I have Pro Logic and I just do everything here. And my whiteboard's got 3 projects I got to work on. One of them will start today, and that's where it is. Like just being creative, but
I love that
I
you're
love being
organized too with the whiteboard. That's awesome.
I have to. I gotta look up there and see what's going on, and then another calendar over here, what's going on in the real world. So
Yes,
here's studio world, here's real world. But yeah,
of
it's
course.
social media. So all right, so what's the
Well
big we gotta do these big things before we
well
wrap up. What are
well,
the
you know what? I wanna respect your time, so we'll invite you back on to do those also at
all
another time.
right.
I do have one more question for you,
Yeah,
and this is
absolutely.
you don't have to do this if you don't want to. This is just the fanboy in me. And I hit you with my rendition earlier in the episode here of me doing your name with the Big Show. Do you think that you might be able to hit one for us here with my name? You could say no. That's totally
No, I
cool.
can do that. How do you want me to do it? Well, it's the
You could even just say John Kiernan on that, because it's ropes and riffs.
well,
Or you could say,
it's
well,
John
it's ropes and riffs,
Keenan.
or well, it's John Kiernan.
Well, it's ropes and ribs.
Whichever one
Ropes
you
and
think
whip.
sounds better.
Kiernan.
Kiernan
I
sucks as
got
a singing name.
Kiernan, John Kiernan. I think I got it. Ready? Where, where is John Kiernan? And we're here on Ropes and Rails. Well, it's John Kiernan, and we're here on Ropes and Rails. Get ready for something that you'll never know. There you go. That was my
First off,
riff set.
thank you. Oh my God, that's crazy. Second, how you just blast that out, no prep, anything. It was just like perfect. Ugh.
Yeah, well, there's so many times someone's like, "Can you do that?" Like come up to me at a gig, and I'm just like, Sometimes every once in a while, I was in another key of the other song, so every once in a while, I'm like, in my head, I'm going on the piano. Where's the note? Where's the note? So
You got to have a tip jar out when you're doing all these cover gigs. You're like, tip this much for well.
yeah. Well, I do that with Piano Man. Like sometimes someone comes up, and I have a little sign that says "Piano Man's $50 tonight." Piano Man's $100 tonight.
That's
You know,
awesome.
if you want to well, it's $10. So.
I love that. Well,
But it's
Joe,
fun. And then there's sometimes people just kind of. I've been hired to just go to a wedding just to do that.
that's awesome.
Can you do this to introduce us? Like we're gonna do the bridal party, and can you just come out and well? And then the song kicks in, and like we actually have the fucking guy here. So, and I think there's a gas and heating place in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I did a version for them, and they were using it for their like jingle for a couple of years. Like I did a parody of it. So
I love that. Your legacy precedes you in all these different
It
places,
does.
in
It's fun.
wrestling and music and
Like every
all
once
that.
in a while, I just forget that I do it. And every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I don't want to brag about it. But I'm like, but fuck that. This is awesome. I'm bragging about it, you
But
know?
at least
So
it's also in, like, musical contexts or shows like this. It's not like you go to the grocery store and you're with the eggs and they're like, "Hey, man," like, right here by the eggs, you're like, "Dude, are you serious? What are we
I have,
doing?"
dude, now that you've put that out into the universe, it's going to, now that's going to happen. And when it does, I'm going to be like, all right, but I'll do it. But we gotta record it because my voice is so big and inside of a grocery store, if I do that at full volume, it's going to scare the shit out of people,
It's
you
gonna
know?
scare the shit out of half the people, and the other half are gonna be like, "It's the dude that did the thing.
Right, and
Go,
then the next
buy
thing you
the
know, someone's
eggs."
gonna come over and like, like leg drop the buns, and the bread section. I'm like, well, let pure chaos happen at that point. But yeah, let's schedule for me to come back and we'll do the more of the wrestling side of things. 'Cause I have to figure out what the hell's going on with my computer. I gotta call my computer guy because
It's
I gotta get this thing working or I'm fucked.
it's
So
all good. Well, Joe
all right, man.
Altier, thank you so much for joining us
No,
today. It's been such
appreciate
an
you, man. We'll
awesome
talk
time.
soon.